I want to talk about a different technology called the X window system. Anybody here familiar with the X window system? X window system is a really interesting piece of software history. For the record, the logo came later, but I think the logo is really nice. But this is what it looked like when it was running. And I think there's some really interesting bits here. And so let's take a trip back to when this is how computers worked. And it was 1985, and we were on the campus of MIT. And the X window system had just kind of, actually, is this out of order? Yes, no, this is out of order. Okay, one second. Okay, we're gonna start, here we go. Yes, so, thanks. Check your slides beforehand, speakers. So, it's 1983, we're at MIT campus, and a $50 million grant is given out. I did the inflation numbers on this. That's $145 million in 2022 dollars at the time to build out a system that could work to literally invent the computer lab. So the problem at the time is you have these two really big manufacturers, Digital Equipment Company and IBM, who both make these two different machines. And there's no mechanism for operating across them, and MIT campus wants to be able to have all of their students have a uniform experience when they're on campus. And so the real reason for this was to try and grow the adoption of computer science, which really at that time was just computers. This was literally about getting people to use computers. and so it's a big grant to do an audacious thing, but we literally have the computer lab, or had the computer lab, if you've ever had the distinct pleasure of going to high school and being in a computer lab. Maybe I'm dating myself, but it's become because of this project. And so the kind of way this went was like, it was 1983, and they literally opted to build this as a distributed system, which, you know, I think sometimes we think like, wow, we are really cool and neat and new, but like in 1983, they figured out a way to virtualize all of their desktops. So when you logged in on MIT, you actually were talking to a set of servers on campus that held all of your state and all of your data, and you were just using a sort of thin client to interact with all of your stuff on MIT campus. So they figured out how to make this work in 1983. Like, my compiler would not fit on, so how does this even work? I don't know, it's magic. But I think what's exciting about this story is the way that this happened. It's like on message boards, it was just somebody being like, hey, I've got this great idea, I've got this new thing, we're gonna call it X. I don't know, let's use it. And if you look at this, I want to point out some things when we're talking about implementations. We have a language, a platform, and a use case, right? The use case in this context is, hey, we need to figure out how to make the computer lab a thing. The language is C. There's a language porting involved in X, which is coming after another Windows system before it. And the platform, there were two platforms that they had to ship to, right? The DEC machines and the IBM machines. And so, like, these are common patterns that will show up again when we're talking about multiple implementations. And I don't know if this is exactly sort of how it went on the day, but like, I'm assuming it got a bunch of reactions that was like, hey, this is really great. I'm doing a modern interpretation of how that conversation would have gone. This is my world's view of it. And so X is born, and everyone's like, this is amazing. X window system, straight fire, this is gonna be awesome. Computer labs are so lit. 1985 is a great year. And from there, we start to get a lot of implementations. You sort of get this really big explosion of implementations of the X window system for all of these different machines. And I think that's a really like, okay, interesting. And it was also what led to the birth of the MIT license. Because at the time, we had all of these different organizations that all needed an implementation of X, that all had to try and figure out, wait, how are we going to work together on this common problem? And there was literally a conversation. So this is like going pretty well. We're reaching incumbency. And there's a conversation happening in the background that I don't have slides for, but all of these people are saying like, hey, who's going to like own the license to this? And MIT actually at one point tries to foist it off. And all of the manufacturers, the capitalist jerks, collectively said, no, MIT, we need you to keep it. And you should be the stewards of this. And that's actually where the MIT license emerges from. We get the collective agreement of the industry that wait, open source is actually a viable thing. And what this actually ends up becoming is sort of the birth of open source software as we understand it today. Which, if we look at that, like that's a pretty amazing start to a story, right? But the thing that blows my mind is that was only the beginning. At the end of this, in 1986, a lab in DEC says, okay, this is going really well. We are going to bring in our A team. And they bring in a whole bunch of new engineers and rewrite all of the X window system from the ground up. And they make it orders of magnitude more performant. And from there, we're still in the phase where we're in the computer lab. We're operating on college campuses. They take this X system, they take it to the next level. Everyone says, all right, you can do that as long as you keep it open source. And they're like, for sure, let's make this work. And let's keep going. And lots of reaction emojis, I'm sure. So X window system version 11 comes out. And this is where things like go from like, wow, this is a really successful project with some like interesting legs to like moving to 9 hardware vendors. MIT license is good. Oh yeah, so this is the conversation I had. But at one point, we end up with 1,200 employees working on this thing. Like Digital Equipment Company goes all in on the X window system. It is still releasing software today in 2022. Like the X window system is still in use in a number of places. This blows my mind. Like we thought this was the story, right? Like if you rewind back to 1985, we thought, wow, we've made it. Our technology, X window system, maybe we could say our technology, IPFS, is doing really well. It's like the incumbent thing on blockchains. And this is what it actually looks like. There's a rewrite, there's a massive market expansion, and it becomes assumed infrastructure. None of us really think about X today, but it is literally being used and relied upon today. And I think that's the kind of thing I want to talk about is this transition to log scale of awesomeness, where there's a real sense that there's more to this story. And so what I'm here to tell you is I think that we're here. I think that we are at the moment where IPFS has reached incumbency, right? When we think about the Web3 space, if you want to take off-chain data and you want to store it somewhere, you put it on IPFS. And that is really exciting. What I'm here to tell you is, for anybody who went to the 2019 IPFS camp, it was a bit of a watershed moment. You are sitting in the 2022 IPFS camp, and I think that it's highly possible that if we all kind of focus on the right things, this is in front of us. I honestly believe the best days of IPFS are ahead of us. And I think that we have a dramatic potential, and I think I'm seeing a lot of germination of that in the way that we're working right now. And I think the big challenge in front of us is this notion of an adoption curve. Right now, all of Web3 and all of us building really innovative, bleeding edge early projects are moving out of innovator space and into this new group of adopters called early adopters. And the thing to keep in mind with innovators is most of our value definition as innovators is defined by using new things. We'll be excited because we use stuff that breaks. It's not a big deal. When we get into early adopters, their definition is a little murkier. Their definition of use case is like, wow, I don't like invest as much of my identity in this, but I do put a lot of, I kind of am piqued and interested, and I know smart people who are using this stuff called IPFS, and so I'm going to give it a shot. This is a very tough challenge. Getting up and over this hump, and we won't talk about the chasm today because it's terrifying, but the early majority is where we want to head, right? How do we become just assumed infrastructure? And the people to do that are actually in this room. And I think the thing that is really exciting and actually really feels like, from where I sit in the community, like a growing point on the open source model, is this idea that we're a network of teams, and that we're reaching deeper levels of coordination than I know of in other industries. I have routine bi-weekly meetings with people that work at other companies and try to coordinate on, hey, we don't have bandwidth to do this, and we really think that you're doing really great. Can you build this with us? That's a new thing, as far as I can tell. I'm sure somebody else is doing it, but the fact that we are learning to work together to build a network of teams building stuff, that's some of what you're going to see here today. And so with that context, I'm really excited to sort of like have a number of really strong implementations come forward. But I hope the thing you'll take away from this is a very vibrant community that is starting to fire on all cylinders and work together in a way that is kind of novel. You're actually seeing people learn from each other, be able to rely on each other's stuff as it is all in rapid development. And I think that's a really exciting moment to be in. So thank you for being here. It's much appreciated.